I'm Nikki, the Obsessive Bookseller. Welcome to my wrap-up for August 2022. I had an awesome month in reading, one of the funnest reading months I've had in years. And it all came down to finally limiting how many books I had going at once, and getting more of a focus on my incomplete series challenge, and allowing myself to pick up next books in a series when I was in the mood to read them as opposed to when I felt like I should be reading them. This was the first month I was really able to focus on getting back to series that I'd already started within a timely manner. And I've currently got about 60 books going. I have a vlog coming out sometime this month that'll go into a lot more detail on that. But I'm also running it as a challenge for my patrons. And it has been so motivating for me. I have this theory that once I get myself down to just a few open series, that my reading enjoyment will get a lot better. And even just putting it into practice this month, I've already seen a whole bunch of improvements. I'm loving reading again. There is no slog aspect. In fact, I have said no to a few arcs just because I don't want to add another layer of obligation to a really good thing. So let me show you what I've been reading. Finishing out what has been published in the Borderlands series, I read Shadows Past by Lorna Freeman. Mine doesn't have a cover, so I'll put one up on the screen. So considering how long it's been since her last release, I don't think we're getting another book in the series. That being said, I wish I kind of had known what I was getting into before getting to this point where I finished everything within it, because it took me until halfway through this book to figure out what she was trying to do with the series. The first book, to me, now, I believe, is more of an appropriate standalone novel. And then it was like she was contracted for more books and decided to do like self-contained little fantasy mysteries within the subsequent books. And that's very much what this one was. It dealt more with the court politics and different fantastical beings kind of coming together, more so than the big tangent that felt like the last book. And so I felt like we got more true to form here. But, you know, for a mystery, it was just okay. It didn't end anywhere surprising for me and kind of was a little bit of a letdown. But the thing is I really enjoyed my time while reading this one. The writing style is so comforting and flowing, and the characters, I can compare some of the characters in here to some of my all-time favorites. I saw some criticism that they didn't really experience a lot of growth in this novel, and I totally agree. But there was so much depth within that very first book that it kind of carried the series for me. So the first book was one of my favorite books I've read ever. It's called Covenants, and I highly endorse that one as a hidden gem. Such a cool book. And now you have the benefit of me having vetted the next two in the series to let you know that you'll still get all those great character dynamics and great writing style, but the plot is self-contained for each book and meant to be kind of like a separate little mystery. So if you just want to read the first one and consider it a one and done, like, it's a really good pick. But yes, look at me go, one series finished. That's always good. For my Read Burn Hoard, I picked up Blood of an Exile by Brian Naslund. It's book one in the Terra trilogy. And I really liked the prologue. And then there were some story components right out of the gate that I was like, I'm not sure if I'm gonna like this. I had a lot of vlogging footage of me going, I'm not sure, I'm on the fence. But I have to say, by the middle of the book, all the way to the end, it won me over. I was thinking at the beginning of the book, I was lucky if it was gonna be a 2-star read, but it ended up being a solid 4. I think what had me on the fence early on was the fact the dragons weren't really central to the plot. I mean, they were significant to the plot, kind of on the periphery, but dragon hunting is not what you were signing up for in this book. It's more of a revenge/rescue story. It was also a bit heavy-handed up front of kind of pounding home certain ideas, like I get it. You don't have to keep emphasizing the point, like, acknowledged. But the further it got, the more I started appreciating the story for the action scenes. It was really good at writing compelling action scenes, and took the plot in a direction that I didn't expect, which I really like. There were certain aspects where we started on a trajectory and I thought, I've read this a million times, I know where it's going. That is very much not the case here, and I love it when books can surprise me. So I felt compelled to pick up the next book almost immediately, but had too many other things going on. So this is yet another example of how reducing the amount of open series I have going will enable me to pick up sequels in a more timely manner. But yes, enjoyed this one. If you're kind of on the fence about it, I'd say give it a go. I read Valor by John Gwynne. It's book 2 in the Faithful and the Fallen series. This was supposed to be my month of tomes, and this is really the only tome I got through, which is fine because it took me almost 2 weeks to read. But I love this author's characters. I love his writing style. He's very unconventional. The chapters in here were incredibly short. He would switch POVs every 5 to 10 pages, and you were following about 10 different POVs. And normally that doesn't work, but he figured out a way to layer them back to back where it kind of built the momentum of the story instead of taking away from the momentum, which is hard to do. I felt like there were a couple of key memorable moments in this book, but as a whole, I think if I don't review it right away, I will look back and think those are the only things I remember about the book. Whereas the first book, I think I remember every single little component of what happened in it. There was so much novelty of getting to know the characters and getting acclimated with the world, whereas this one was just more of a middle book continuation. So for my love of the series as a whole, I'm rating it highly. For what this book specifically is adding to it, it's yet to be seen in comparison to the next two, but it was just, it was a solid installment, and I really loved reading about the characters. One of my favorite things about this series so far is the high stakes. You hear in other series how things are so dangerous, but then no one dies. Every battle in here, you've got to brace yourself. That additional layer of investment really does help keep you engaged in the story. It's quite good. And there are also a few plot points here that are totally unexpected. Had I predicted from the first book where some of these characters would end up, I wouldn't have even been close. And I love that about this series. So, solid read. Can't wait to get to the next one. And I was supposed to be reading The Shadow Throne by Django Wexler, book 2 in the Shadow Campaign series. It's the book I started the month reading, and I just found myself on the verge of nitpicking every little thing, and that's an indication to me that I'm about to have a DNF. But I want to have read this series. So I put it down with the intention of just taking a break, picked up Valor instead. I think it was a good choice, and now I'm feeling like maybe I'm at about the halfway point. Maybe I could pick it up again here and there and kind of work my way through it slowly. Neither the plot or the characters were really working for me in this story. A lot of it felt unfeasible. If you've heard anything about this series, you know this one takes a more political approach, and everything we did in the first book out in the desert with the army, totally irrelevant to this one. This one takes place in a city, and instead of following all new characters, it's like the author felt like he needed to bring in the past characters, so he created these weird slots for them to be involved in this conflict, and they do not fit there very well for me. One of them in particular feels like she's just kind of walking around, adding dialogue here or there, but she's not really adding anything to the conflict. I think it would have been much stronger to leave them out and just start with fresh characters. So it feels kind of clunky in that regard. Also, the conflict and the use of power, nothing about any of the decisions anybody is making in here seems like an efficient use of resources. So the whole thing just is not working for me, especially considering that I had just read and finished and loved the Age of Madness trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. This book and that trilogy have so many things in common, but that one, in my opinion, did everything much better, and so this one's suffering by comparison. If I had read this one first, I may not have been so harsh on it. But yeah, I needed a break because obviously I was starting to get a little cranky with it. It's not bad, it just wasn't working. So I'm going to maybe pick it up. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, 50% through that one. Progress is good progress, you know. I picked up the entire Bartimaeus trilogy by Jonathan Stroud. We read the first one for book club, and I loved it so much that I just continued reading on. I have had this series on my shelves since 2006, And I can think of so many different instances where customers came in asking for a recommend that this series would have been absolutely perfect for. So I'm angry that I missed out on so many years of good recommends and this gem has just been sitting collecting dust. It was so good. It captured the same nostalgia of reading a Harry Potter book for the first time, to the point where I was glued to the physical copy. I was walking around reading it while trying to do other things. I dragged the physical copy to work and back with me every day. I think the basics of the story will resonate with, early Harry Potter, where he's living with the Dursleys and kind of dealing with not having anyone to really take care of him. But then there's an added layer of these demons that they summon, and Bartimaeus is a demon that kind of marches to his own drumbeat. And his chapters in here were my favorites. They come with these footnotes. And I don't have a lot of experience reading books with footnotes, but I had heard in so many different writing seminars that just don't use them. People hate footnotes, but I have to say, the footnotes are what I loved most about this series. The author used them to add a little bit of information, but for the most part, he used it to enhance the character Bartimaeus and to kind of add a different layer of humor to the story, because it's as if he's writing to the reader about his experiences on these events, and then the footnotes are just to add emphasis, oh, I was lying here, but And this is marketed as a middle grade series, but by no means should that deter you from picking it up. It is written in such a sophisticated manner that it could very well sit on a fantasy shelf. I think the only reason they marketed it to that young of an age group is because the character is very young. But Bartimaeus isn't, so, you've got a whole bunch of kind of layered adult humor in there. But at the same time, I think it still is accessible to younger readers. So especially if you want to give kids a little bit of a challenge on reading. I feel the same way about the Fablehaven series. That one was written with more than just children in mind, and I think that was the case here as well. So yes, absolutely loved the first book. The second book, even though it took my least favorite plot point and kind of expanded on it, still enjoyed it thoroughly. There's a couple of scenes in here that were just completely absorbing, where I lost touch with reality for a bit while I was reading. I thought it was so cool. And then immediately dove into the third one, and by the time this video goes live, I will have finished it, but at the time of filming, I'm about 25% in and loving this one just as much as the first one. In fact, maybe a little bit more, because we're getting some answers here for questions that I've had since the beginning. Great characters, fun plot, great nostalgia, lots of humor. I can't recommend this series highly enough. Total win. For my Project YA, I read Paranormalcy, first book in the series by Kiersten White, and it didn't go particularly well. This is Old Coworkers, one of her favorite books, and that's one of the reasons I picked it up, but I really love paranormal stuff. And so I thought, okay, even if it has young adult tropes, which it did in abundance, at least I'll like the paranormal aspect, because this girl is kind of a hunter for this facility. She goes out and tags these paranormal creatures and kind of helps round them up. Well, that lasted for about 2 chapters, and then we focused on an insta-love that I thought was really weird, and the whole story kind of shifted focus, forgot about all the cool paranormal stuff, and focused on just the fae, and just nothing about it worked for me. If I were smart, I would stop reading now. But I have all 3 books, and I'm kind of a completionist, and they didn't take that long to read, so I'm thinking maybe I'll see where the story goes. Maybe it'll have more components in the future that I like, but yeah, at the moment, it was just okay. I talked about it at length in my Project YA video, but to sum it up, I have read fae books that are a lot better than this. I recommended some in that video, and for young adult in general, I think a lot of the things in here are the reasons why people don't like YA. So not a very strong addition to everything that I've read. But I've had it for years, so at least now I've finally read it. And finally, I read Soul Taken by Patricia Briggs. It's book 13 in the Mercy Thompson series. I'd had an arc for this for a couple of months, but I was so buried with too many books going at the same time that it wasn't until earlier in the month that I finally read it. And that was part of the motive of reducing how many books I had going at once, because I had one of my all-time favorite series, a digital arc for a new book, and I wasn't able to pick it up for a couple of months after getting it. Like, that's tragic. Anyway, this was a solid installment in the series. The author took a little bit more time than normal getting it published, and I think it showed in the story components. Like, the mystery was a lot better than I remember having read for a while from her. I like the supernatural dynamics. I love that there are still Enigma characters that I wanted to know more about. One of my favorite things about her series are werewolf pack dynamics and kind of the politics that go along with that, because there's a magic element on top of everything. So it changes motives and makes things a lot more interesting. And this one had some pretty decent pack politics. This one served more in the series to enhance character and give more depth, as opposed to advancing overall plot like of the series. But I'm okay with that. I will read anything Patricia Briggs decides to produce. I can't wait for the next one. And that's everything. I had so much fun this month, and as you can see, my focus on reading books that I physically own has led me to have a bigger stack to share at the end of these videos than normal. I think I've about doubled how many books I'm reading that I actually own, as opposed to what I was doing even 6 months ago. What's even better is this month I don't feel like I was pushing myself to read any extra, but I was consuming content like crazy. So I won't actually know if my reading life will be improved by reducing the number of open series until I get to that point. This is one of those working theories until I actually can function within the constraints of my goals for that. But being able to devour the Bartimaeus series, so good for my soul. I picked it up because I was genuinely enjoying it, and I felt like I got a much more rounded experience, because I forget characters and I forget events if about a year goes by. I still remember key moments and things can jar my recollection, but I lose that emotional connection to the story if it goes too long. So I'm hoping to continue my new mindset and motivation, and keep working towards getting to where I want to be in my reading life. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what your favorite reads have been for the month, and I hope to catch you next time. Bye.